This is a Brooklyn-bound 2 express train. The next stop is Fulton Street.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
Welcome to a Place to Go podcast, where we go behind the scenes to look at some of the people and issues that are changing park and play spaces across Canada, and in some cases, the world. Greetings from Winnipeg. I'm your new host, Brendan Sadat. Back in episode 8, we received some great tips from a grant writer about how to find funding for playground. Even with those tips, fundraising can be difficult, and especially for a small community or a school. Another option to save on installation costs, which, by the way, can consume up to 40% of your playground budget, is through a community-built method. A community-built playground not only saves money, but builds a sense of corporate ownership and builds relationships in the community. It requires members who want to play an active role in their community's public space, and with a bit of leadership, it can be done with great success. That's okay. I kind of like having a bit of background noise. Well, you'll probably hear my cat. My door's closed. I think I'll be okay.
Alrighty. Well, I've done a couple out of my truck on the highway. I'm sure they had background noise there.
Just asked my guest today, Pat Zelenak. Pat is our design and technical manager for Playworks, Inc. He coordinated many community builds, including a couple in some other countries. And he's here today to give us some tips about what makes a great community build. Pat, before we begin, can you kind of just give us a little preamble of what a community built playground is and what it kind of entails?
Absolutely. So community builds, they've been going on for over 100 years. I mean, that's how our cities and our communities have been built, from the community centers to the rinks to some cases schools. Right now, what we've been doing for the last just over 30 years is building playgrounds. Volunteers coming together within a community, doing a community build on a playground accomplishes a number of things. One, the big savings, obviously, as you had mentioned, 40% if you have a contractor installer versus volunteers, but it brings together a community where you get to know your neighbors. They feel a sense of ownership of what they've accomplished in building that playground. So they tend to take care of things a little bit more and pay attention to what's going on in their community. And the end result that they've successfully installed a playground with a professional supervisor there to guide them along to see where their kids are going to be playing for the next how many years that they're within that community area. So it accomplishes a great deal.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine saying I built that to your kids would definitely drive home the point that that playground is for the community and by the community.
Absolutely.
Typically, when you're doing these sort of installations, what kind of communities take on a group community build installation? Is it smaller communities, or does it kind of depend?
You know, I've had every size going forward over all of the years of doing these. I've had 15 people that we've had on a site, where I've had some where I've had 150 volunteers because it was a destination playground in an urban center. So we've gone from all sizes, from, as I say, the 10 to 15 right up to 150 volunteers. So there's no size limit. Whatever the size, how we're out there to help and facilitate to get them installed professionally as volunteers.
Do you have an example of maybe one that you've done recently?
Actually, we've completed a couple. Actually, the last one was in city of Edmonton, was at a school called St. Alphonse, and it's one of our inner city schools in Edmonton, Alberta. So we had a group of 35 volunteers, and we started on a Thursday afternoon, and by Saturday late afternoon, the playground was completed, finished, concreted in. We used a contractor to look after the curbing and looking after the landscaping, as well as adding the surfacing in.
Based on that, it sounds like supervised installations happen quite quickly, or community-built installations, like you start on Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely. So St. Alphonse School that we did there, to give you an idea, if it was a contractor that was going to install the playground, that contractor with his manpower would take anywhere up to 10 days to install that playground, where because we bring a group of volunteers on of 30 people roughly, we've taken that 10 days and shrunk it down to actually really 2.5, because Thursday we is a half day starting the project, and then it's a full day Friday and full day Saturday.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. So in a situation where maybe time is of the essence, it might be better to do a supervised install if you can get the volunteers required to do it.
Absolutely. You when you're building a playground, you build it, people are definitely going to come. The kids get excited within the area. So when it's an extended length of time of building and you get in color and you have things being built out there, and a contractor has to keep things fenced off, but kids get excited. So, if you're in a school zone, being able to do a build and having a playground completed, and Monday morning it's being inspected and Tuesday morning it's being opened.
Wow.
That's how quickly it can happen versus that 10 days and kids climbing fences to get at that new slide or the new climbing wall.
When we're talking about school builds and those kinds of things, are there any projects that would, ideally not work for a community build, like specific maybe materials or wooden structures or anything like that wouldn't be ideal?
Nowadays, with some of the newer styles of equipment and our suppliers that come out, there are a few items like our sculptures, for instance. We can do some very massive sculptures, are very unique and one-ofs. They can be very detailed and require a bit more of a professional construction crew and installers to be on site to do those kind of things. There's some other parts where you got to get cranes involved. And in some cases, if volunteers aren't familiar with working around a construction site, it's a call that has to be discussed with the group and saying, listen, with cranes being around, maybe we got to stick with contractor installs. But it's very rare. I'd almost say 95% of the equipment that's going out into these playgrounds can be completed with volunteers.
We're talking mostly about playgrounds, but for instance, say a spray park, that wouldn't be something that we would volunteer install, correct?
No, absolutely not. Not volunteering to install and doing a community build on a spray park. However, there are portions of a spray park that I've done over the years where we get the community involvement because we need the site to be excavated. We need the materials to be removed. The community at large a lot of times will secure a donation and getting free concrete and free road crush. Those are the kind of things that they can get involved with a water park, even though the end result, it has to be installed professionally with journeyman plumbers, electricians, and those contractors that are trained for that. But we can get them involved in other ways to save money.
Right. Yeah. Gifts in kind is
absolutely
what we call them, right? Like, what kind of skill sets are required from these community members, more than just a good attitude?
You know what? My saying when I'm talking to communities in schools and I'm discussing a community build with them, and that's a question they always come up with. So, what type of people are you looking for? My answer to them is that if you can tell me the difference between a hammer and a screwdriver, you fit the job. But it can be done by anybody as long as they're 16 and over. Through labor relations doesn't allow anybody under the age of 16, but we can. I've installed with junior high schools and high school kids where they want to come out and participate. So we've done that way. So anybody can do it.
Right, and that's a great opportunity for kids to see. Just basic construction principles. Or work cooperation and all of these things. So that's really great. So in terms of what the playground company or the supplier provides, or even Playworks, what do we kind of give to the client to help make sure that playground is a success when they're pulling together volunteers and giving up so much of their time and effort?
A few months before the installation the community build is even going to take place, we walk them through the steps and the process. We also provide them an installation manual to the chairperson so that they can review it just to be comfortable with it. The next stage of it all is that we want to make sure that when you're doing a community build, the community build's got to be fun. We always promote that, volunteers that are coming out to do the community build, they're going to have a lot of fun and they're not going to want to even go home. They're going to stay completely throughout the entire build. And I've had that on many cases. So we want to make sure that we have food and water on site so our volunteers are taken care of. And insurance for a volunteer for a community build, there's a couple options that can take place. One, you can always call Workmen's Compensation Board, whatever province you're in. You can set up a package for a volunteer installation for a community build. And then what they do is they base the cost on the number of volunteer hours put in. And on average, I know in Alberta, on average, on a fair size build, it would cost you roughly about $300 for some insurance coverage of workers' compensation. On some of the larger centers where the larger communities, almost every community has an insurance policy in place for their volunteers within the community for doing anything that's volunteer work, which would be a playground falling into it as well. So most places already have that in place. We do what we call tailgate meetings, and I promote that we do anywhere up to minimum of 4 tailgate meetings a day. So we would start at 8 in the morning. We'd have a coffee. We'll have some safety rules laid out, but we also explain what's going to take place from 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at coffee time, and this is what we plan to accomplish. And then we do another meeting at 10 o'clock, and what's going to happen from 10 till 12. And we do that all the way through. And typically we work till roughly about 8 o'clock in the evening, but the volunteers are taken step by step continuously so that they know what's happening. We encourage to have the fun. We have lots of fun on the job sites while we're with the community groups and having some great laughs, lots of picture taking for the memories and the times capsules that we've done throughout some of the playgrounds that have been buried. So they'll be fun to look at in the future. We set that whole thing up and take that stress off of the volunteer and the community groups so that they can have a lot more fun and relaxed for a great install.
Right. Yeah. And it sounds like fun is definitely part of it to keep morale up during those kind of projects. And communication is key. You cannot underline that enough, right? With that many moving hands and bodies around, you want to make sure that everyone's contributing and working towards the same goals. You mentioned that we do also have a supervisor who we would send, or a playground company would send to supervise the installation, make sure everything is going properly and that it's safe, right? Because that supervisor needs to be certified. Can you talk a little bit more about the supervisor and their role?
With our organization, what we offer is we have a supervisor. Depending on the size of the project, sometimes you'll have one supervisor. Sometimes we feel that you need to have 2 supervisors because it's that big of a structure. The supervisor comes out. We, as Playworks, provide all of the tools that are small enough. We always encourage our community groups to bring the rakes, the shovels, and wheelbarrows, because those are kind of big items to haul around. But for the rest of the tools, our supervisors will come with tools. Then the supervisor role is to make sure it's surveyed and laid out properly. The holes are the proper depth, and all of those things are step by step walking through the community groups. So they walk those sites, giving direction as they're going. And whether you have 5 people, 10 people on site, or 150 volunteers, everybody needs to have a job. And something our supervisors that are trained installers are advised that volunteers that have come to the site, they have come to do something. So it's very important that everybody stays busy and has something to do, because somebody standing on the sideline that's there for any length of time gets a little discouraged. So we're always in that mode of making sure everybody's busy. We're always asking continuously, anybody looking for work, because we'll put them to work, and we keep the whole thing flowing. The key thing with a supervisor on site is that it doesn't hamper your warranty at all. So there still is an installation warranty that we do for 2 years. So that supervisor has to make sure that as things are going in and when things are completed, that they do their walkthroughs and that it is still CSA compliant to the Canadian standard. We have to make sure that the kids are going to be safe and it's a successful build.
I'm assuming that there's some sort of fee involved with sending a supervisor out as well.
Absolutely. Depending on where it is, on average, the supervisor costs are from 8 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, roughly around $900 a day. That's as a budget number type deal. That's what we would utilize. Sometimes it goes up and down a little bit, but it all depends on the location.
So we're talking about, it's kind of a dance, right? Everyone's working in conjunction. You've got your supervisor on site. So with that, you're probably going to have some problem. So how do you resolve these problems? Can you give me some examples of what comes up more often than not, and how you overcome them?
Some of the problems that happen on any kind of a build, whether it's a community build or whether it's a contractor's build, rain has become a main issue on some builds. Volunteers get very stressed because of rain. and you have to postpone it. And there's a cost factor, absolutely, but we always try to work and minimize those cost factors to the volunteers as well, so that we can keep the build going. We have no control on shipping. Sometimes we have equipment that gets damaged during shipping. And if it can't be utilized, or if it got cross-docked someplace and they've lost a piece of equipment, which has happened a few times, and that can put a little bit of a damper on your installation. All of a sudden, you're missing a couple pieces. So typically how we handle it, and as Playworks, we step up and we understand that the community builds. It takes, a fair amount of work to pull people together and get time off. What we do is we'll either budget so that we have an installer or two that will go back to the site and take care of those issues. If it's anything handled by the manufacturing, or if it's the freight company, we'll put in a claim to pay for those installs to be finished off properly. Or we'll discuss that as a team with our community build board people and say, okay, well, we'll have this new piece of equipment that's going to arrive here on Monday. If we can have 2, maybe 3 volunteers that can come to the site, we'll get it all taken care of and installed, and it'll be completed. So we have a support team here in our organization that if we end up with something that's gone sideways and you find out late Friday afternoon or Saturday during the build, typically most offices are closed, our supervisors have a contact so they can get the ball rolling much earlier than waiting until that Monday morning to react to it.
Right, yeah, and that actually leads really nicely into my next question is, once a community has accomplished this enormous task and they have this wonderful new playground, what about the back end? What type of maintenance do they kind of have to look at? If the playground is transferred ownership to, say, the city or the town that they're in, what's that process look like? I know we send manuals and those kinds of things. Can you kind of speak to afterwards, what kind of needs to be done and by who, and those situations that arise?
Typically before the community build takes place, we find we've been working along with the group for a while. We will already know if it's within the town or the city, if they actually have a playground inspector that is within that vicinity and overseeing things, or that is their maintenance person. So if that's the case, we will make sure an owner's manual is taken over to that person. We will actually call the park manager up or the inspector up and schedule them to come out and actually do an inspection of the brand new playground on a Monday morning so they can walk through it. We will provide them any information that they require and walk them through the next steps. And typically, a lot of times, we'll leave them a maintenance kit as well. So we get that coordinated, and then it's handed over to the town or to the school, and their maintenance people will look after anything for ongoing maintenance with a playground. And typical maintenance is actually really going and checking your playground. Has it been vandalized? A volunteer install, and even if it's a contractor installation, it's like a big, huge mechano set. You have a million nuts and bolts that are taking place. No matter who it is, whether it's a professional or a volunteer, sometimes some things forget to be tightened up. And that's the idea of the maintenance department coming through. Sometimes they'll come across a month later that, this is loose, and they'll just do a quick tighten up. In some cases, in some rural areas, the schools or the village or towns do not have anybody for maintenance or anything. So what our supervisors will do will always go to the school custodian, have them come out, get them to do a little bit of a walkthrough and a little minor bit of training of, when you're there every morning, this is what you need to check for. This is how you can check if anything's loose quickly, and it takes you all of 20 minutes as you're walking through, just to make sure things are safe for the kids. And if there's an issue, there's a 1-800 number right here on this post of the playground. Phone it, that comes into our office so that we can at least assist you on making sure it stays safe.
So this has been a really awesome chat, Pat. I've got one last question for you. From your experience, what's the most important thing for a community build project to become successful?
It's having that positive attitude coming out to a site, being excited and enthusiastic. The toughest part of an entire project is pulling the money together this day and age. There's grants out there that can help you out and everything else, but that takes a lot of work from the playground committee to pull all that money together. So the most important thing is once you have your playground ready to roll, your money's in place, and watch the colors come up and the playground being built and enjoy what you've accomplished. That's the key thing. And building new friends on the community build.
We call it a community build for a reason. And not only are you building a playground, but you're building your community up.
Absolutely. The build we did in Dominican Republic were Playworks and WestJet. They brought snow machines to the Dominican. They made snow on the beach. We were having a snowball fight at plus 30 weather. It was a blast. But we did a big Christmas thing. That was there. And it's actually, you'll see if you ever Google WestJet Christmas gift or whatever it is, and they've got one with the Dominican, and it's at the very end is where the final gift was a story maker that we provided to them. And I was down there for the community build, or the volunteer build, I should say, with WestJet, because the community had no idea they were getting it.
So I want to thank my guest, Pat, for sharing his wisdom about community built playgrounds. If you have any questions or like what you hear, or just want to give us some feedback, please send us a message to playworks.ca and rectechindustries.com. And like I said, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening.